In this portion of our program, this is Bob Salter, and we're pleased to have a guest who is in studio with us. We always love when that happens. Doesn't happen often enough on this program or at this station or at this hour, quite frankly, on Sundays. Camille Raia is in studio with us. She has an interesting story to share because we're going to be talking about, let me give you an overall context, and then we'll build into the story. It's a story of a New Jersey-based legal professional basically rebuilding her life. That's kind of a tease with this. First of all, it's nice to have you join us on our program. Good morning.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and talk to you.
There's a lot of different things I want to ask you. I want to get into talking about your story, what you've been through, because it's, to say the least, quite the experience. But
yes.
A couple things background-wise, because I always like to set background for folks listening to discussions that we have. I mentioned the fact you have a legal background.
Correct.
How did you and why did you get into law?
It sort of just happened. I always had an interest in science, and actually I saw law as a possibility of maybe going into an area of environmental law initially, because I had a passion for the environmental sciences. It evolved differently after that. Having a Bachelor of Science in Biology and minor in Chem, I ended up first doing patent work and then ended up doing some high-level litigation, like medical malpractice, asbestos litigation, things like that nature. So things just kind of evolve. And I did a lot of trial work, and I found that fascinating, and I was very much interested in doing that in my early years, mostly because it frightened me, and so that was something I wanted to tackle, to just basically to have such a handle on cases and then be able to present it to a jury. And I was grateful for that experience and having done quite a bit of that, especially in the asbestos sector, representing shipyard workers, more so down in Baltimore. I was down there for 2 summers back in the day of late 80s, early 90s. From that, I really developed a confidence level of being able to take the practice. I was working in firms, some prestigious firms at the time, and just step out on my own, which I did in 91.
Was that a frightening move?
Yes, but I was ready for it. I was ready for it. I wanted to have that autonomy. I wanted to have that. It was still at a time that I saw a lot of the glass ceiling that still existed everywhere, and I figured this was something that maybe I eventually can do and develop, and something that I can maybe do part-time, or if, ideally I married somebody who was also an attorney and could assist, would be able to then continue with it and me to step back into it. It was all just an evolutionary process. It wasn't, you can't plan everything. So that's how so law came about as a result of that. I was always told that I spoke well and I thought well, and that I'd be good at being an attorney. My father was very supportive and encouraging me to be an attorney. In fact, he's a physician, and though I was thinking of medical school, I think doctors want their kids to be lawyers and lawyers want their kids to be doctors, and that's where I kind of fell in. So I sort of, okay, I'll try law.
And I'm always curious about this with lawyers. How much of what you're doing in practicing law really almost turns into performance?
When you're a litigator, right now I've been doing a lot of transactional work, so it's not so much that. It's more, it's a different realm. But when you're a litigator, very much so. Very much so. It's really taking the facts that are there and then just kind of harnessing them and trying to present them in the best format that would serve your client. And it's the way it is. And you have the opposing side doing the same for their client.
Okay. Now let's get into talking about this story, because it's an incredible one. I mean, how are you today, first of all?
I'm well, thank you. It's been a process, but I am actually, as a result of all the trauma that we've experienced, I feel actually more empowered and stronger as a result of it all. Pained, but actually I tapped into some strength and resources within myself that I didn't even realize I had until I was faced with circumstances that required me to tap into it. So I'm grateful that I know that part about myself that I did not know before.
Okay. Now, to take us through the story, As you mentioned, your ex-husband was an attorney as well.
Correct.
All right. How did the two of you meet, first of all?
We were both very active in a local legal organization,
Mm-hmm.
and we met there.
And with his firm, the firm that he was involved in, what exactly was going on that caused this basic downfall here?
Well, he joined my practice in '96, 5 years after I had started the practice, the year we got married. And then, very intelligent man, and I still say a good man, but something clearly went wrong, because he's not a greedy person.
Mm-hmm.
But he did some poor judgments. I can't explain what happened exactly, but the year after we got married, I had my first child, and then after my second child, then moving to New Jersey at the very end of '99, he basically continued the practice on his own and developed the practice and grew it. It was initially a general practice with one section being elder law, and he focused primarily on elder law and became well respected in that field to the point where he was actually speaking at seminars and, from what I understand, doing quite well and had it together. I think just the pressures of, I had my third child in the spring of 9/11, not 5 months before 9/11, and the practice was in New York City at the time. We had moved to Bergen County,
Mm-hmm.
initially living in Bay Ridge, but had moved to Bergen County by that point. And with the loss of the building, because it was closed as a result of what had happened, it was down in that area, and with the onset of litigation concerning asbestos issues later on, he found himself what was to be temporarily relocated into the Bay Ridge section of Brooklyn.
Well, you didn't want to be anywhere in this area where we are
Yeah,
now.
he couldn't be,
that
but the
time,
commute was
obviously.
just,
Right.
it wasn't no longer taking the train in anymore, and it was just from Bergen County, it was hard. And 3 little kids at home, and whoever knows, eventually he just ended up taking certain funds from client accounts and guardianship accounts that was improper, was
Mm-hmm.
wrong. And I can't explain what went wrong there. And when I do ask him those questions, he just tells me, you can't make something rational that's irrational. He acknowledges it was wrong. He doesn't. Something broke, because this is a good man. This just did some bad stuff.
Mm-hmm.
However, the trust and all that, and the pain and the aftermath was just too devastating for the marriage to survive.
So how did you find out?
The day is emblazoned in my head.
Mm.
July 1st, 2008. The children were home from school. My youngest had just finished full day, first grade. 7, 8, and 10-year-old children sleeping in their beds. I get the door rings very early in the morning. And I look out the window and I see a whole number of police cars with their lights twirling, and it just didn't make sense.
That's not a good sign.
Oh my goodness! But I wasn't making sense. It just was, because this is not. They're at the wrong place. What's going on? Is there some emergency? Something going on the block? Is there another attack we're being warned about? I didn't know what. In fact, I opened the door. I even said, "You have the wrong house," and they said, "No, we have the right house." And at that point, I still thought my husband was flabbergasted, not knowing what was going on. This is what I was assuming. I mean, because this is a man who was always such a straight shooter. I mean, he would be upset if I put the recycling in the wrong compartment. So I never, ever, and always had a presence of calm, that you can rely on him. So he did not show the meltdown he was having inside. So this apparently, unfortunately, was going on for some years, that he had taken improperly. And the poor man needed intervention, but because of his such a calm demeanor on the outside, he didn't get it, and he was a likable guy, and so he got passes, and he needed help. But in any event, so I had all these police officers coming into my home, and at that point, I was still, from what I learned later, part of the investigation, because my name was not only on the firm, it was also on certain matters of which I was appointed guardian on back in the 90s when I had practiced, that he had continued to manage. And so I understood later, but at the time I didn't, why I'd be part of the investigation, because my name is mixed up in there until they do their investigation and realize it had nothing to do with me. So it was scary. From what I understand, they had issued search warrants at the same time at the Brooklyn office that he had, and then at my home. And they required me to sit downstairs on the first floor and wouldn't let me go to my children who were sleeping in their beds. That was very, very troubling because I was so scared of my babies. This is not what, this is a B movie I'm living. This is not my world. I was in shock. And that feeling lasted a long time. They were there for a good number of hours. I'm so grateful my kids slept through that. And they left the house with boxes of different papers and computers. I mean, even papers that had to do with my children's schoolwork that were mixed up with my papers that I was very active with the school. And I think I was a grade parent at the time. And so there was a lot of things I did with the school. They just left with a lot of stuff. And I was still couldn't make sense. I'm thinking, this is a mistake. Did somebody file a complaint? I didn't. And it wasn't until after they left that I was able to speak to my husband. And I looked at him and I asked, do you know what's going on? And all he said at that time was, I advanced myself on commissions. And that alone just threw me for a loop. I understood that as being commissions that a number that he's entitled to take, but that he would take early before the subsequent court order. Usually you have a number you can figure out is based on a formula, gets approved by a court examiner, and then it might take some time for an order to be issued.
Right.
So I'm thinking, okay, this was money that he would have been entitled to take, but it was still wrong to take it early. To me, that's, as an attorney, that's awful, and that's awful enough in of itself. And he said they wanted him to go down and speak to them. And I was like, yes, go for it. I'm thinking, go explain. This is before I learned after the fact that it was actually over time he had taking more than what he was entitled to. And that was really why, when he had so much work there to get done, yet he, for whatever reason, couldn't get it out. I mean, he had a breakdown. He clearly did. And I feel for him, but the aftermath was just so painful and so devastating.
We're talking with Camille Raia on this portion of our program on The Fan this Sunday morning. It's the Sports Edge with Rick Wolf that follows our 8 o'clock update. Football Sunday time with Malusis and Deal after our 9 o'clock update. And, of course, NFL previews at 7:30 this Sunday morning.